One of the most astonishing pictures of man's trips to the moon is an ordinary family snap, a photo of no interest except to the wife and children of astronaut Charlie Duke, who decided to take it to the moon. But the simple fact of removing it from its usual context to leave it on the lunar surface was enough to make it extraordinary. An estimated 350 billion photos have been taken since the invention of photography in the early 19th century, the vast majority of which have no artistic intent. Family photos, vacation snaps, professional document photos, identity photos, photos of landscapes, of machines, of events, for the press, and erotica. This massive deposit has been rediscovered by photographers who use it as the raw material for their own work. Pictures taken by others, so-called found images, as in lost and found, but also refound, full of new imagery and new meaning. A procession of men wearing hard hats advances through a kind of foam field. Who are they? What are they doing? No way of knowing. This photograph was published in 1977 by two young American photographers, Larry Sultan and Mike Mandel, in a groundbreaking book called Evidence. Proof in the scientific sense of the term. All the pictures in the book were originally made as documents, visual records, and kept in the archives of governmental or private research institutes. Sultan and Mandel sifted through these archives for over a year before finally choosing the 60 photos for their book, and published them as they were, with neither annotations nor indications of origin. Stripped of its initial meaning, a document photo becomes nothing more than an image, an enigma. The photos in the book are presented in pairs, a very basic form of montage that creates new formal associations which each viewer is free to interpret as he or she pleases. Here, it's perhaps the play on black and white. Here, a similarity in the gestures, moreover incomprehensible, of the two men. And here, the objectivity of the camera itself as it records with the same coldness the image of the man, the subject of some kind of experiment, and the image of ears of rice. The true subject of the book, Evidence, appears to be photography itself, and the artifice on which its so-called documentary objectivity is based, like this white sheet of paper, an old photographer's trick to bring out the subject more by removing the natural background and context. But isn't that exactly what Sultan and Mandel did by depriving these photographs of their worth as pieces of evidence, as if to say, reduced to just an image, it can prove nothing? The same photographic device was discovered by German photographer Thomas Ruff, a leading figure of the Düsseldorf school, in these photos taken in the 1930s for a tooling machine catalog. Behind the machines photographed in the workshop, white backgrounds were used to isolate them from the mess and to facilitate the work of the graphic artists who would later cut them out for the catalog, standing alone, with nice colors and against a neutral background. In these photos, the machines are perfectly in focus, while the background sheets, clumsily held by assistants, appeared blurred, blurring from movement due to the length of exposure. This contrast fascinated Thomas Ruff. When he appropriated these images in a 2004 series, he accentuated the machines by coloring them slightly, thus giving them the smoothness they were meant to have in the catalog, while the rest of the image retains its original black and white. This swinging between focus and out of focus, the fiction of the catalog and the reality of the workshop, reveals the ambiguity of these apparently objective images. The 1950s photos found in the archives of a Lebanese portrait studio highlight another aspect of commercial photography, its systematic nature. The radio with which this woman is posing isn't hers. It's a prop that the photographer made available to his customers. It allows them to be set in a scene, with them as the proud owners of a symbol of modernity, while also giving them a support to lean on, facilitating the pose, which is always the same from photo to photo. What's striking about these images, found by two young Lebanese photographers, Akram Zatari and Walid Raad, in the archives of the El Madani studio, is the omnipresence of props, like these oversized caps in which these two Palestinian sisters are attired, or this graduated stick, which the photographer regularly used to put his subjects at eye level, and which these young women have used to build an image. Being photographed means playing a role, appearing rather than being, even if it means resorting to trickery. Here, the baby is held in this acrobatic position by the hands of a hidden assistant, betrayed only by the strange lump raising its bib. But whatever the trickery, the magic of the studio allows even the most serious of men to turn into a circus act before the camera. Another much appreciated prop is the cardboard cutout. Here, it's a starlet from film manufacturer's advertising board used to create comical situations. A photo of a couple in a conventional pose looking serious. The same couple, still just as serious, with a baby and a friend of the husband. Back to the cardboard cutout and tomfoolery. The legitimate wife is still there, masked at the bottom of the photo. Other images bring less of a smile. This young woman came to be photographed without her husband knowing. When he found out, he demanded that the photographer scratch the negatives so that they couldn't be reused. Another more radical means is cutting the negatives in two. That's what one portrait photographer in a small town in Germany did. Wanting to dispose of his archives in an ecological way, he gave them to fellow German Joachim Schmidt, known for his work with found images, but nevertheless making them impossible to reuse. Schmidt then embarked on an astonishing work of facial reconstruction by associating fragments of the same proportion and size for this series called photogenic drafts. These Frankenstein-like assemblages allow Schmidt to highlight the aesthetic formulas of portrait studios whose only aim is to make people look good for the sake of society. In contrast, amateur photos are often intimate images that you keep for yourself, like you keep your own memories. Like those in this anonymous woman's photo album. Various images, a simple memory aid, a map on which she wrote the most wonderful moments of her love life. But amateur images can also surprise us. That's the case of the 120 photos assembled by Swiss photographer Luciano Rigolini in his book What You See. Images captured with basic cameras, stunning in their force and originality. They evoke the research of the new vision of the 1920s. The casual charm of pictorialism, and the American mood photography of the 60s. In fact, most of these pictures are failed photos, involuntary gestures, technical errors. It was chance which captured these images, along with the eye of the person who chose them, from tens of thousands of other pictures, giving them a new visibility and thus becoming their ghost author. A more recent series, Surrogates, is a collection of 125 images downloaded from online auction and shopping sites. These are photos of second-hand automobile parts presented by their owners on screensaver backgrounds to make them stand out. These low-definition images are displayed just as they are, with no touching up or reframing. What transforms them is the mere fact of having been chosen, classified, and offered for us to view, not for what they are in reality, but for the way they seem to echo the major trends in contemporary art, and in a way that's made even more stunning by their completely involuntary nature. Don't change the original picture at all is also the rule established by Joachim Schmidt in his series Pictures from the Street. Discarded images, damaged by the weather, ripped up because a relationship is over. Joachim Schmidt picks up debris and scrupulously puts it back together again with a respect for its integrity that borders on fetishism. The images here are transfigured only by the violence of the story behind them. But there's another tradition dating back to the early 20th century where there is little respect. Cut with the kitchen knife through the last Weimar beer belly is the title of this Dadaist photomontage by German artist Hannah Hoch from 1919. A killing game in which the found images are carved up and the best pieces reduced to simple signs. Here we see all jumbled up the head of Einstein, a symbol of modernity, heads of politicians and military men, the enemies of Dada, on top of scantily dressed showgirls. And right at the bottom, surrounded by her Dadaist friends, the tiny head of the artist herself as a kind of signature. In a later series called From an Ethnographic Museum, which combines African masks and Western imagery, Hannah Hoch's technique is pared down. But once again, photomontage acts as a form of language. The initial images mutually destroy each other to create hybrid creatures. Here, a sad-looking primitive mother. The modern eye, pasted onto the African mask, turns her into a madwoman. Half a century later, British visual artist Linda Sterling took up this tradition of militant feminist photomontage with her series Pretty Girls from 1977, which combines women's bodies found in porn magazines with the consumer goods that modern man dreams of. A sign of the times. It's not only a criticism of society, but also of the role of photographic images themselves, which turn bodies into merchandise and merchandise into objects of desire. The denunciation of power aligned with images from fashion and advertising has become a major theme. In 1968, the American Robert Heineken put a page from a magazine into an enlarger and projected it onto a photosensitive paper, obtaining a negative image in which are superimposed the image on the front of the page and the image on the back of the page, which the light of the enlarger reveals due to the page's transparency. It's as if to say that every image masks another image, which is just as artificial. The superimposing and the inversion of tone make the images ghostly and surreal. For Heineken, who quoted André Breton, they are strictly documents produced by the reality of the page itself. The title of the series is based on one of those stupid catchphrases that only advertisers can produce. Are you real? Except that Heineken ironically cut the last letter, producing the enigmatic, are you thus underlining the absurdity of the question. Heineken continued his struggle against all dominant images by using a craft knife to cut through the pages of a fashion catalog. The cutouts, which become haphazardly superimposed, dislocate the models' bodies and evoke the visual chaos we have lived in since photography invaded the world.
Sam, will you please go make a copy of this?
In the 1960s, the proliferation of images spectacularly increased due to a new invention, the photocopier, which stretched even farther the possibilities of mechanical reproduction. You could no longer, as this ad for an early photocopier claimed, tell the original and the copy apart.
Thank you, Sam. That was fast. Which one's the original?
The process would give rise to new forms of photomontage. In 1964, Wallace Berman photocopied a transistor radio ad, always the same one, in which he inserted all sorts of images from around the world. The series was entitled Verifax, after a two-stage photocopying process which first produced a negative image. Berman stopped there. He presented his negatives as tableaus, emphasizing the link between new reproduction technologies and a taste also new for repetition and series as a way of denouncing the stereotypes that govern our world. Likewise, this collection of aerial photographs of houses taken in the 70s by a German company hoping to sell them to their owners. The company went bust. German artist Peter Piller obtained the 12,000 photos and made several series with them, including this one entitled Sleeping Houses, which groups all the homes with their shutters closed. It's a strange effect, like a world deserted by its inhabitants. But Piller refused any interpretation. He saw himself as an anthropologist, archiving ordinary images which, by their very platitude, bear witness to our way of life. Boredom, eternal repetition of the same thing, became a major postmodern theme. In 1999, under the title Boring Postcards, British photographer Martin Parr assembled 160 postcards of the 1960s Britain, whose common point was the social climate of the period and a feeling of emptiness that the photographers of these images captured, almost in spite of themselves. Parr liked the garish colors and bad taste. Excellent antidotes, he said, to the pretensions of so-called artistic photography. But irony is not without nostalgia. These pictures bear witness to a vanished world, to a time when you could still be amazed by the photo of a freeway, the embodiment of modernity, and the optimism of a country rebuilding itself. These are references that enable us to measure the scale of change and the speed at which our way of seeing things becomes worn. Photographs themselves become worn. They exist in time, suffer from its passing, and slowly fade like the images engraved on the tombstones rephotographed by Pavel Maria Smejkal in a series called Fade Out. In another series called Fatescapes, Smejkal questions the effects images have on us. You think you're seeing a shot of the sea, of a grassy knoll, or a hilltop ravaged by fire. And yet there's a feeling of déjà vu. These are the settings of some of the best-known and most dramatic photos of the 20th century. Raising the Flag on Iwo Jima by Joe Rosenthal. Death of a Republican Soldier by Robert Capa. And American Soldier Landing on Omaha Beach, again by Capa. Smejkal erased the heroes from these images and kept only the empty settings, which the absent subjects nonetheless continue to haunt. After the subject, the next step is to erase the author's own idea by blatantly taking over the work of another. This is called appropriationism. In 1989, American artist Richard Prince appropriated this image from a cigarette ad which the law prohibits us from showing. At the top of the ad is the name of the brand, while below is a cowboy at full gallop. Prince rephotographed the ad, erasing the brand name and keeping only the lone cowboy. Presented as the deconstruction of an American archetype, his cowboy is now on show in the top museums. But Richard Prince, who has secured the copyright, prohibits us from showing it. The law prohibits us from showing the top. The artist prohibits us from showing the bottom. All that's left is an empty frame, a pure concept, but an image that is nonetheless an effective representation of appropriationism. You can go even farther and not change anything at all. In 1979, American artist Sherry Levine made a name for herself by identically reproducing one of Walker Evans' most famous photographs and signing it with her own name. Here, the act itself is an artistic act, in the tradition of Marcel Duchamp, which questions the notion of authenticity and ownership of a work. Sherry Levine continued this approach with Rodchenko, then with August Sander, photographers that she chose because they were, like Walker Evans, men who were white and dead and personified in her eyes the old male-dominated photography whose power she was against. Beyond provocation and postmodern rhetoric, there is a sadness in these images that Sherry Levine calls ghosts of ghosts, as if photography were dead, and all we can do is indefinitely repeat what has already been done. But there's a much lighter form of appropriation, too. One person selling old photos online put parts from a child's game in them to stop people downloading and stealing them. Photographer Martin Krall appropriated these images, child's plaything included. In the pictures he chose, the little figurine joins in the fun and gradually asserts itself in the old photos until becoming one of the subjects itself. Instead of protecting the images, it invites us to join it inside, too. Swiss photographer Corinne Vionnet proposes another form of sharing with her impressionist views of major tourist attractions, which she creates by superimposing hundreds of photos she finds on internet, taken by tourists who have all stood in the same place and all used pretty much the same framing. You might sneer at such sheep-like behavior and the collective short-sightedness it generates, but these evanescent ghosts are those of our shared memory, which can no longer separate the real world from the innumerable images we have seen of it.